Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from Arkansas, I have the CEO and Chief Product Owner of the Scrum Alliance, Howard Sublett. Howard, it is really an honor to get the chance to speak with you today. Thank you for joining me here.
Lizette, I think the honor is the opposite direction. Like I told you earlier, I had some of your very first superpower cards, and I don't think we've ever had a chance to meet in person. So I'm honored to get a chance to come and visit with you a little bit. So thank you.
This is going to be great. So let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Embarrassingly, there's a lot of dead Post-it notes on my desk. I tend to write when I'm on calls because I tend to remember things that I'm writing. MacBook laptop up on some old books here, and then a repurposed giant TV to where I can have multiple things going on, and then an old school lamp over here to try to light me so I'm not in the dark on video calls all day long. But this is actually a guest bedroom in my house, so this is a fold-out couch back here. So we had to move the bed and put a fold-out couch so I could be here more often.
All right. And is this office new since the pandemic, or were you working here beforehand?
I worked here some, so I've been remote for quite some time. Our offices are in Denver, but I live here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, so I would travel quite often. So when I was here, I would work here, but most of the time I was in Denver.
Okay. So wow, traveling back and forth between Colorado and Arkansas. Okay. So that's changed a lot in the last year. Do you miss it?
You know, there are some things I miss terribly. I'm a people person. I love meeting new people. I don't actually like the travel aspect. My job has put me in everywhere from Japan and China and Kathmandu and India, all over the world, Brazil, Colombia. I don't really remember much about the places, but what I remember is the people that I meet there, the meals that we have together and the conversations we have about culture and differences and what nuances of work and how that they organize work there. I miss getting off a plane and meeting people face to face. I don't miss the 36 hours worth of travel and layovers. That's exhausting. I
Yeah.
don't miss that part of it. The other thing that I'm finding that's really different for me, I thought I would have far more time now. Like you're talking to somebody that flew 300,000 miles a year.
That's a
Yes, it's a
lot.
lot. It's a lot. And so I thought now that I'm here, I will have more time to focus and get more work done. And I will especially have more time to read and do the things that I enjoy doing. And what I'm finding is that I I'm addicted to technology and I'm addicted to this ability to have interaction with people. So I find myself on 10, 14-hour Zoom calls back to back, and then so tired I can't even pick up a book. When before there was that beautiful window on a plane. If you traveled much, you know what I'm talking about, that when you boarded the plane, that there was no Wi-Fi until you hit 10,000 feet, and you could open a book and in complete silence, you could read. And then you had the same on descent. And so I could power through books. I would leave them in airports, buy a new book, get another book, and read. And now I'm finding it's really difficult to pick up a book and actually do something for me in this kind of a 100% remote world.
Okay, we're going to dive into that a bit later, this whole being always on, because I know you're definitely not alone. I think most of us are struggling with sort of having boundaries or spending too much
Sure.
time in 2D, really, I should say. But I'm very curious about Scrum Alliance. So let's first talk about what is Scrum Alliance, and then I want to ask you some questions about like how you guys dealt with pre versus post pandemic and the changes that you've gone through as a global organization. But first, tell us, what is Scrum Alliance exactly?
Yeah, I don't want to get very pitchy, but we're a global nonprofit, or what not for profit in other parts of the world. But I like to think about it as a for impact organization. So every dollar that we receive is because it's moving the mission of agility forward. And every time we receive dollars, we have to spend it on advancing the mission of agility. So we're a company basically that's owned by the taxpayers of the United States. So there is no There are no stockholders that are making money. There is no one that is buying houses on the beach. And as a trade organization, we're a membership organization for our members and by our members. You probably know us. People forget about who we are, but they remember our products like our CSM, CSPO, Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, through our Certified Agile Coach certifications and Certified Scrum Trainer. So we're impacting the world of work so that the world of work is more joyful, more prosperous, and more sustainable. And we do that by helping to ensure a high caliber of a learning experience into the world. People get this kind of life-changing, fire-igniting, belly-burning kind of a way to come back to their world of work and want to be disruptive and want to change things. And by funding research and funding bringing people together all over the world. So I think in the last 5 years, we've spent a little short of $15 million just in bringing thought leaders together around the world for different types of events or user groups or um, uh, funding regional events in Peru and Kathmandu and Nepal and just everywhere that you can think of in areas that they couldn't afford to bring people together. We fund those times to bring people together. Now we're funding them in a remote way, but we're still funding them.
Right. So let's dive into that a little bit. I want to get into sort of the Scrum Alliance team, like what you guys went through maybe as a team and the challenges that you faced when the pandemic hit. And then I'd like to dive into a little bit into the trainings, because I can imagine that you had a lot of in-person trainings that all of a sudden had to be converted to remote. So, but let's start with the Scrum Alliance team. What happened during the pandemic for you guys?
Well, just shortly before that, we leased a 28,000 square foot building in Denver and bought all new furniture, put in a beautiful
Oh,
spiral slide from the upstairs to the downstairs, and a big event space where we could host all kinds of events for people coming in. It was supposed to be a community center for us to be. It was more space than we needed, but people have been desperate for a space that they didn't have to pay for. And so we were going to fund that to be around. So we were in it for 2 months.
wow.
And then COVID hit and we went 100% remote. So our team, our internal team, our staff are all organized in cross-departmental Scrum teams. So they're not each team has IT, has marketing, has customer support, has an education person. They each have a product owner and a scrum master. And they were sitting together in co-located spaces. Most of them were in Denver. We have a few remote people, but immediately everybody went remote. Denver went on pretty hard lockdown. So we've been in a remote environment ever since. And it was a different change for some. Some of us have been working remote a little bit longer. But for some, it was really difficult to make that switch, mainly because, and I know you were living in Colorado for a while. Real estate is difficult there, and many of them were in places that they lived that they didn't have a proper workspace.
Right.
So they were having to sit on the edge of the bed and try to work because there isn't a place. They don't have an extra bedroom in their apartments. So we ended up allowing them to come to the office and get their chairs and get their desk and get extra monitors and then take them to their personal apartments because we knew we needed to give them proper workspaces at home that when we could for those that
Right.
have the spaces.
Right. Yeah. Camping is fun, but not for too long. So
Yeah,
if
the first
I,
few weeks they're like, I can make it work, and then after a little bit, they're like, I need my keyboard. I can't keep doing this.
right. My external monitor is calling my name. Yeah, totally.
Very much so.
Okay. So in terms of then communication, how did you guys restructure what you're doing online? What do you use to communicate with each other? What are some of the tools?
Um, well, I think most like everybody in the world right now, Zoom and Slack. We do pretty regular all hands calls on Zoom. We have experimented a little bit with other kind of networking or co-working kind of products. Um, to a lesser extent, were they successful or not? I do have another one that I don't want to give you the name of it yet because it's not out there yet. A buddy of mine has built where he's actually completely built. And when we're ready, I'll tell you about it. He's completely built our physical office in 3D modeling to where you can
Awesome.
go from your desk to the next desk and have conversations in a virtual way, but it is our office, the one we spent so much money to try to get for our team. So I'm excited. We're going to be launching that in the next week or so with them. So
Awesome. I love that because it gives it a feel like if you're at the office still, and when
right.
you go back, you can sort of seamlessly reintegrate as you were.
Yeah.
How is that going to work when you're going back?
I don't know. We do have some, the answer is I don't know. Uh, we have some team members that are desperately ready to come back to work and wanting to be in the building, and others that are actually getting more comfortable working remotely, and some in the middle of that. And we're trying to figure out, because of our tax status, because of how we are as an organization, we don't qualify for the kind of loans that would let us get the personal protective devices and all the screens and everything that have to happen. So what are the modifications that we have to have in a building to make it a happy, safe workplace? And is it really going to be the same with only 10% of the people in the building? That's way too big for them. And so is it more productive? Is it more beneficial for the happiness of our team or not? So we're asking the questions every month of the team, of our staff, over what would you like, what we would like to try,
Mhm.
what's a way that we could roll into this as the pandemic lessens if the vaccines work. I don't think we have a good answer for that quite yet.
Yeah, I think everybody's sort of waiting to see what's happening. Nobody knows. Like, is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be a year? I think
Right.
we're all, so that really matters in terms of planning.
I'll tell you, when I started thinking about this, and I'm not a doomsday person, but people were so excited, Lizette, about the vaccine and the vaccine coming, and now it's all going to be better. Um, we've had a flu vaccine since like the 1930s, and it was widespread adoption of a flu vaccine since the 1940s globally. And yet we still have massive cases of the flu. And I know COVID is different than the flu. I'm not saying they're the same, but they spread in similar ways, right?
Right.
And so if that's any indication for how well we're going to get rid of a virus, if we haven't gotten rid of the flu in this many years, I have the feeling this will be a long game for us.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm trying to keep my hopes in or my expectations realistic. So yeah, in the about a few weeks ago, the Dutch government announced not only that they were extending the lockdown for another month, but that they were adding an evening curfew to it. And my heart just kind of sank, like we've been in our homes, like really in lockdown for months now, and just
Right.
another month, it's like, oh my God. So I'm trying to really keep it in perspective. It's rough. It's rough for
It's rough
people.
on all of us. We are supremely human, and we crave other humans. And
Right.
I think that we're going to see long-term effects for our kids and for us as adults on how that this impacts us socially.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we need each other in a human way, and yeah, it's a very odd situation. I always thought that pandemics were things like in the old world. It's like, oh, that's all like old history. But the more I learn, the scarier it is. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, but let's not go into pandemics. We're all sick of the pandemic. Let's talk about. I'd like to dive into your trainings because Scrum Alliance gives a lot of trainings, and you had a lot
We
of
do.
in-person courses. How did you adjust your trainings? I see that you've taken some of them online. Have you been able to take all of them online, or how has that worked for you?
We have. I mean, we were founded in 2001, and there was one unbreakable rule that in person was better, face to face interaction. That they had to be in person, and they couldn't be remote, right? And the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we had to make a decision, right? And you're right. We needed to continue on our mission and continue. People were desperate to learn and to grow, and especially in the light of all the global changes, people needed to be able to adapt in a different way. And so the skills that we were teaching are the things that we really needed to be teaching at that moment. So I sent out a call for our trainers and coaches around the world, 350 or 400 of them out there, and said, it's 1 2 week sprint. Like, it's pivot time internally for our teams inside. um, all of our guidelines and regulations, the every page on the website that talked about it had to be in person changed. Our course search changed to accommodate asynchronous learning at different times. um, and externally, every trainer had 2 weeks to pivot some of their trainings that they have been doing for some of them for 20 years, that they have really invested in experiential in-person learning. And how do you ensure that you create that same experiential learning over Zoom or over some technology like that? So the collaboration amongst them in our kind of internal circles that they work on of, hey, we do the ballpoint game, or hey, we do the marshmallow challenge in my game. Oh, we had to do this to teach these things. How do I do that remotely? And it was amazing how well that they all shifted. Now, some weren't as fast as others, and they were pretty convinced that this was going to be a 2-week window or 3-week window, and we were going to go back to in person, and they were going to wait. Others jumped on it really quickly. I wanted you to know that our net promoter scores, we really started surveying every single attendee of those. Like, how would you rank these in net promoter scores? We were in the 91, 92 in a net promoter score from those on the experiential axis over how impactful was this training, because we weren't really sure, to be honest. Will it be as good? Will it be okay? Will it get, is this experiment, are we going to have to pivot and do this again? But the results have been really good. Not only just from the experiential side of it, we're reaching people we never thought we would reach before.
Awesome.
And we brought up Colorado earlier. The number of emails that I got from people that are on the west side of the range, the west side of the Continental Divide, that said it's impossible for them to get to all the courses that are over in Denver area because it's so long up and over the mountain or through the passes. And then they have to find childcare, and then they have to get, like, they can now take courses, and people in other countries that it's just not financially viable for them to incur all those expenses and be away. And now that it's remote, we're finding lots more interesting times that people can take these courses and fit them in between normal life. They don't have to take a day away to fly somewhere, 2 days in a course, and a day to fly back. It's now something they can fit in with their day and be great parents to their kids, husbands, and wives.
Right. So pros and cons to each approach. When the pandemic is, I don't know, I'm not going to say, let's say over, but we both know it'll be like the long tail when it's safe to sort of go back to in-person events. Will you keep remote events?
I think so. There are such advantages to it for us in reaching people. At the same time, I do believe that there is something unique about an in-person experience.
Certainly.
And I think it is a different experience. People will need to have a choice between the two of them. And for some, a remote learning experience will be the best that they want and what exactly fits their need and their learning style. And for others, like, I know many of the countries in Europe, the businesses there are holding back and waiting for an in-person experience because they want their people to be trained in person, and they're still waiting. So I think there'll be quite a bit of a demand for in-person again, but I think we've got to keep this door open. It's opened up so many things that I never expected.
Right. Indeed. It's not an if and, or, it's more of a like, okay, now you can do both instead of just doing sort of it expands the offering in a lot of ways. If the experience is good online, that's of course the caveat of being it online. I want to move into, I know that recently it's been the 20-year anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on changes that you see. I mean, is there any part of it that is outdated, especially 20 years later and during, I guess I should say, during pandemic? As face-to-face was such a critical part of the original manifesto. But I think, and in 2001, what year is it now? Time is so weird right now. But in 2001, maybe we could have replaced e-face to e-face instead of face-to-face. I mean, 2001 was a totally different time. So I just know that it's the anniversary this year. And given that you're in Scrum Alliance, I thought, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, as you know, I wasn't there. I didn't sign it. But we just hosted a 20-year anniversary reunion in in the room at Snowbird Lodge with Alistair and a whole bunch of them that showed up. We had about 7,600 people show up
Wow.
to relive that event, which was on a virtual basis. So it was really interesting listening to them. You're right. Technology limitation meant that it was nearly impossible to have any type of high bandwidth communication in a remote way. We were on, God, was it Commodore 64s back there and other kind of machines and dial-up internet that sounded like, dragons screaming at you when they dialed in. I'm telling my kids about that and they were like, "What? They did what?" Um,
Right.
so technology is different now, and it allows a much higher bandwidth of communication. So, but I still don't know whether if they were to sit down and sign that today, whether they would change that. Um, as much as my wife and I've been married 30 years. And when I was traveling before, like I told you, we would do video calls, which were wonderful, but it was much better when I was home. um, Face-to-face interaction is far different and far better and a far higher fidelity and bandwidth than it is on a remote. Less from that is just phone calls, and beyond that is text, and then emails is the devil. So we,
Amen.
so there are different gradients of that. So this is as really as good as what we can do right now, and it's wonderful. But I do still think there's something about face-to-face, but I do know some of the early agilists would say that you can't have an agile team unless they're face to face, and I don't think that's true anymore. I do, if back when I was doing coaching and training, that I would want people, new teams, to come together for the first time to meet each other as humans, get
Mhm.
to know each other, do something social, go have a meal together, maybe play some silly games or something where they know something more about each other than just simply the task at hand. Because I think that that helps with collaboration. It helps with people in their bandwidth of communication. But once they kind of get through that part, a distance-based collaboration can work really well.
Right.
It's not, I don't think it's a barrier anymore. I really don't.
Right. But having that touch point of having been together is very valuable. I had the same experience on the Management 3.0 team when I was the remote office manager there. And once we met in person, I mean, I resisted meeting in person for years, and I was the one making the decision. So for years, the team didn't meet. And then we met once, and we, of course, met in different cities after that. But we met in Lisbon, and we had one night out where we all just drank a little too much and danced in the streets all night. And we bonded like we had never bonded like that before, and we worked together for years. So yeah, there is something to that. Absolutely.
There
Face to
is. I mean,
faces.
even the remote people, back when we were in person, we would bring our remote team into the office to spend time together. It just, like I said, we are all still very supremely human, and technology is not a replacement for face-to-face interaction. It's better than nothing. It's better than what we used to have 20 years ago. I don't know that it's a complete replacement.
No, it's different. I keep
It's
telling
different.
people they're different mediums of working, and it's like radio and television, right? Like you would design your content for each medium very differently. And but I like the idea of having a touch point, but then going back and being able to work remotely, because you don't have to be in touch every single day. So what I'm seeing is the future of work is choice. People want to
Mm.
choose when and where they're most productive. And so I'm not sure if you're seeing that within your organization too. I mean, you guys are talking with organizations globally. Have you heard anything about what they're saying about the future?
Um, I know the future of office building leases is probably in serious jeopardy, because now we finally have that decision. Companies that were saying that it wasn't possible to be remote now see that it is possible, and people are productive. So they do have an option to be in a building or not, and giving people those choices. You know, there is some wisdom in choice, and then there's some wisdom in helping teams either be, I don't know if you've had this experience. It feels like that when teams are fully remote, it works well, or when they're fully together, it works well. It doesn't work really well when you have 10 people that are together and one that's remote, because there's always a disconnect. And so there either has to be a really healthy balance and a respect for those that are remote versus in person. And so that by choice, it makes it very difficult to have any kind of cohesion and team building. I know both of my youngest son and his wife are both high school teachers at different high schools, and they're having to blend in-person learning from distance-based learning. And in one of the schools, the students have a choice to either be remote or be in person, and they go back and forth. And the other one, they don't get that choice. They sign up for one, and that's where they are. And the ones that are having choice back and forth to where that they go from having, two people in person that they're having to teach and 10 remote. How do you prioritize a learning experience when it's this way and when it switches? So it feels like, just from a team building dynamic, there should be some balance rather than just freedom of choice to move. But I do want to bring it to our team and find out what they want to do that would work for them, and then try to help it be something that's productive together, if that makes
I
sense.
I think that seems like a great idea, because indeed it's freedom of choice for the individual, but it's also the choice for the company to decide how remote they want or need to be. Not every company needs to be globally distributed with nomads moving around. I mean, it's not necessary. So I completely agree with this. There's a spectrum. I'm noticing the time. I have so many questions. I've got a couple of things I just want to ask you. Oh, I could go on and on. So one of the things that I saw when I was reading through actually, before I get to this, I want to talk about the first thing that you mentioned earlier, which is you thought you would have more time
Yeah.
now that you're not commuting so much. And before we started recording, I was telling you that it seems like 2020, at least what the data is showing us, is that we're productive. Like, people have gone remote and they're very productive, but they're not sustainable necessarily in what we're doing. We're getting too much time in 2D. And so just want to ask this question to you. How do you keep your boundaries healthy? And then also, how do you make sure that the people that you're working with are keeping healthy boundaries and not overworking, if that's even possible?
I wish I could say I had it solved and I was doing a great job with it, but in all honesty, I don't know that I am. Um, and I think it has to do with different personalities and needs and things that drive us as humans, right? So for me, this is me personally. I really am, like, I love stuff like this, like a real conversation with somebody. And
Yeah.
this is what gives me energy and gives me passion. This is what gets me up in the day. This is what actually gives me ideas to way to solve complex problems that I have to talk through it with people. And so I'm always trying to find a way to be online to have a conversation with somebody, because it will inspire something to happen. It helps me resolve things that are going on. My wife, on the other hand, she's an accountant, and she's an accountant for Habitat for Humanity, a nonprofit as well. And
Hmm.
she loves complete quiet, and she works in spreadsheets and ones and zeros. She is far more productive if nobody bothers her, and she can get more work done. So she doesn't crave the interaction like I do. So I end up on these Zoom calls more often than she ever would. She really doesn't like them, and it's how we kind of get fed for our creativity and for what we need. I have asked many of my team. I've told them all, set your hours on Slack, set your hours on those things, because if you get emails afterwards, just don't answer them. We've tried to ask them to, you know, set your phone and stuff to where you don't get pings and notifications after certain hours and before. As a global organization, when China is waking up, we are far asleep. So it's happening around the globe for us. So I have asked them to set their devices to where that they're not constantly being monitored. At the flip side of that, I'm the one excited when my phone goes off all night long, because I'm interested in who to talk to. So I,
Right.
I, I have a problem. Hi, my name is Howard. I have a problem.
You're not alone. I also have this problem, and I think anybody that really loves their work and working with a global team, it's very, very difficult if, you're getting emails and, I just, so indeed, you have to really put those hard boundaries in place. How do you know if your team is overworking?
Um, Well, each team has a scrum master, which is very helpful for us. And they're not only the kind of the shepherd of the scrum process for them, but they're in a way they're there to ensure that joyful workplace for the team. And they're pretty good at helping ensure that they don't pull too much work in, that the work that they have is sustainable. And I get a pretty good indication when some of them calls me and says, I think so and so is, you may need to nudge them to take another vacation, because with open PTO, they can take as much time as they need. And many of us don't take that time, especially when you can't go anywhere. Why would I
That
take the
also
time
doesn't
off?
help. Yeah.
So we do have many people internally for us as a staff that are checking on each other. Like, we have to be our own stewards of our own culture and our own sustainability, and be able to help hold the mirror up when we see it in each other. And yeah,
I love that advice. Checking on each other. I think that's something that we can do now, is just, even though we can't see each other, we can still check in and just see how people are doing. So I love that. Great feedback loop. Okay. I've got to ask you about Scrum for Families, because I think that there's a lot of agile parents out there who probably have been experimenting with this. But I saw this on the Twitter feed, and I'm not sure if you participated in this or if it's something that you saw that you retweeted. But it just seems like a brilliant idea. I mean, not only do kids learn the methodology, but it also seems like it would really help organize the families. So, how do
yeah,
you do
it's
Scrum for Families?
I think that's back a little bit to your earlier thing. The Agile Manifesto was focused specifically into software, and what we're learning is the principles and values, and the frameworks to a lesser degree sometimes fit really well outside of just software. It may have been born out of software, but we've moved well beyond. Um, the particular article was a family in Denver that happens to organize their entire family around the Scrum. And the mom gets to be the product owner, because, as we know, mom's in charge. And the kids have a simple board that has their homework. It has their violin lessons or piano lessons, whatever it is, and their chores on it. And the kids at the beginning every week can make a commitment over what that they can get done. And part of that definition of done for their homework, not only is it got to be turned into school, but mom has to check the work. And she gets to do the acceptance testing or the QA role on that, to ensure that it is actually complete before it goes. That's that last check in there. And it's let the kids measure their own capacity. It's let the kids figure out how much can they actually get done and be creative over. But I don't really want to do that. What if I did these other things instead? Would that be okay? So the kids, it's two brothers, and it's interesting how they will trade off over, well, I'll take these two chores if you take those two chores. And they self-organize and make the decisions, because as a family they say, here's the things we need to get done before the
Right.
end of the week. Can you help me? It's a team-based thing. But beyond that, I mean, we're seeing phenomenal growth of Agile or Scrum in education, where teachers are giving a list of the things that need to be learned, and team-based tables of kids are pulling and saying, teacher, we can get our times tables by Friday. We can also do this section of history by Friday. And they say, okay, well, as a team, that team has to either succeed as a team, or they won't, and they have to pass with an exceptional rating. So they'll set a bar of
Mhm.
80% or something for the thing. And the kids have to learn to help teach each other, instead of just having the teacher teach all of them. So in some of these examples, the students are finishing a year's worth of curriculum by Christmas, by mid-year. And there's one particular school in Phoenix, Arizona, Hope High School. I thought I wasn't going to remember it there for a second. And it is a school of last resort, a charter school in the American system, where most of the kids are kids that have gotten kicked out of the other schools for poor grades, or maybe they had been arrested for something. These are children that
Mhm.
haven't fit a normal society way of learning. Doesn't mean that they're dumb, but they just had something cause them to have that issue. And it was beautiful to get to visit them because each one of the teachers have been trained in how to work in an agile way. And each one of the students actually go through training and they pull that work to themselves. The most amazing moment for me was I was sitting visiting with the principal, and the principal, somebody comes in and says, and I don't remember the young lady's name, but she comes in and she says, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Susan has just finished all of her credits. She's ready to graduate. Now, this is like Tuesday at 9 in the morning. And the principal said, do you mind? We've got a graduation to do. I'm like, okay, sure. She gets on the intercom. Everybody in the school stop, come to the center part where there's this giant board. Every kid has their picture. Every kid has their goal in life, what they want to do and what they want to do when they graduate. And they have a little virtual cap on one side. And they stop everything because this child has now finished all the credits that they need to graduate. And they give them the floor and they get to say something and they get to move the tassel from one side to the next. And the whole single piece flow in education, like that
Wow.
kid does not have to wait until everybody else is ready. That kid gets to graduate when they're ready. They do have a big ceremony at the end of the year for the families and everybody to come, but they can move on then instead of waiting. And they've gone from having like a 1 or 2% graduation rate to like an 80% and kids going to college
Awesome.
because kids are pulling the work to themselves and they own their own education now. It
Brilliant.
you've opened up a can of worms. Sorry, you made me think
No,
about Scrum and school and Scrum and education. So
I love it. I think I have the next topic for for another podcast. Indeed, yeah, indeed. That's a whole that and what an amazing skill to learn. And it just also shows that when you give people the frameworks, that they will take and run with it, because most people really want to be good learners and good,
they do.
like you want to contribute and work on interesting problems with really fun people. That's, I think most people would really love that. There's always, I always say, there's always a few George Costanzas out there, the people that will always want to lay under the desk and hide from any work that comes their way. There's always that type. But I think by far the majority of people want to work on interesting work with fun people around them.
The rewards for that, I mean, the personal rewards are immense. Why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean,
Yeah,
if you give people the opportunity to rise to an occasion, people rise.
right.
They will.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Love it. Okay, we really are almost out of time, but I just would like to, for my second to the last question, I would like to ask, what advice do you have for Scrum and Agile teams out there right now navigating this pandemic? Is there anything that, general advice that you would give, or something that you've learned about the process? Anything you would pass along to others?
Um, well, the pandemic has shown us, so many organizations didn't feel like they didn't realize how fast the pace of change can be. And now I think that they've realized that it can be disruptive. Um, Plan just enough. Sometimes people tend to plan sprints and sprints and sprints and sprints into the future when we don't really know what the future might be. Plan just enough to deliver value now. Um, Keep iterating and making what you're making better. Um, and try to ensure that your team is actually taking care of themselves. This is Too many people are misusing the word productivity for ensuring people do the maximum amount of things. I mean, one of the things in Scrum I've never really liked is this word sprint. And to me, sprint means run as hard as you can until you pass out at the end. That's not a sustainable pace. Like you need to leave space for the unimaginable to happen, and you need to leave space to be creative, to delight your customer. Even in a remote way, you probably need to do that even more because your employees are now home with their kids and their dog and their spouses and their everything else going on. It's a chaotic world out there. So I think grace needs to be something that you give them when they start thinking about their capacity, rather than trying to think about it being the most productive. Let's talk about it. Let's focus on the most valuable, not getting the
Love
most
it.
things out the door.
Right. Creating value. It always comes back to being an entrepreneur now for years and working with a business coach. It always comes back to what value are you delivering to your customers? Otherwise, you have no point of being in business if you have no value to offer.
That's right.
Howard, this has been an amazing conversation. I know we've gone way over. I really appreciate the generosity you've given with your time. I've taken copious notes. The show notes are going to be awesome. So thank you so much for being here today.
Again, thank you. I've enjoyed it very, very much.
All right, everybody. Until next time, be powerful.